Hi, I'm Al Adamson. We're here again in Lincoln Hall, and this time I'm with Chris Mason, longtime friend, colleague, and inspiration. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. That's kind of you to say. You're also an inspiration. The work we're doing together is very exciting.
Well, thanks, Chris. Well, you have been instrumental. Let's just start off right at the bat. I mean, people data for good is something that is really important to both of us. And people analytics can be esoteric. When we talk about the future of work, it can be confusing. And why does it matter now? But you have taken this and kind of made it your mission. I mean, you've built your priorities around this notion of people data for good. So can you share what it means to you and why you've made such a commitment to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, doing things for the good of people, good for the planet, hopefully something that many of us can get behind. But I have to give some credit for kind of clarifying that focus to the work that the B Corp movement has done. Yeah. Very similar to the conscious capitalism movement, I think, as well. There's a lot of overlap there in their thinking. B Corp probably influenced me the most because I worked at a company called Patagonia. So
I'm not familiar.
Yeah. You're wearing one of that company's great products. That's right, exactly. So it's a wonderful coalescing around this idea that you can use business for good, right? Mm-hmm. And then taking it further, they did a ton of great work through a company called B Labs in figuring out, well, how do we actually measure this stuff and certify people and all those kinds of things. So it's first I'm inspired by the idea and the kind of the grandeur of that idea, but also equally kind of inspired and emboldened by the fact that some people have gone out there to start thinking about what this looks like. Mm-hmm. And of course, part of using business for good is thinking about how's it serving the good of the people who work for that business, right? Yep. And as a human resource professional and a data analytics geek, wow, that's a great way to kind of bring all these things together. And so, yes, absolutely. Why do this work if you're not doing it for a little more than just, the profit? Well,
from a principle standpoint, I imagine listeners, whether they be a business leader or HR professional or right on, but we got to make some money. We have shareholders. We got all this. But so it's not just about making employees happy for the sake of being happy. Mm-hmm. There are some business outcomes that, financial results being among them that ensue too. So it's a balance for you, yes?
Absolutely a balance. And there I can take some inspiration from the current company I work with is a company called KeHE. And KeHE is a food distribution company. We primarily focus on the grocery business and particularly in the specialty, organic, and natural food product space. So if you go into a grocery store and you go into the organic section, most likely you'll find some of the foods we distribute, and it's any kind of the healthy granola bars you might know, and we can name and think of many of those brands. So we focus a lot on that space. We care about what food does to people and the goodness of food, and so KeHE, more recently than Patagonia, but only a few years ago now, became a B Corp as well, and said we're inspired by this idea of using business as a force for good. But to your point, folks at KeHE also said, well, you got to do it for the good of the business as well. And so there's actually a group of folks that run around, particularly in our finance world. They have this great T-shirt that says, "No margin, no mission." So they always remind us, you do good as a company in order to be able to do good for people and the planet. Patagonia was a similar concept, do good to do good, and so we always think, all right, no margin, no mission. And oh, by the way, no mission, then who cares about the margin in some ways? So they go together, but it's a yes and you can't exactly just focus on the good without making some money.
T-shirt worthy, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So what is your role there? I mean, I know what it is from my perspective, but you go back to your days at Sears and then Patagonia, and now, for us as talent analytics professionals, we've kind of been perceived as the data reporting folks, but there's so much more to not only what we do as a discipline, but what you have led a charge on. Can you share what you're doing there? In your
Sure. And I have to give a lot of credit to other colleagues throughout the years who have inspired me and helped guide me into what are the best ways we can make an impact in the data analytics space. Because to be honest, I think when I started my career, it wasn't as codified a space. I have a background in industrial and organizational psychology. So that was my PhD coming out of school. If I had known of this thing called data science, I would have realized that's kind of what my PhD was in, but we didn't really, it was just getting going. And so what you went into was selection testing, or inside businesses, talent management. And so I primarily grown up as a talent management guy, overseeing performance management or engagement surveys or things like the kinds of things that now have been adopted, I think rightly so, into a broader analytics lens. It was at Patagonia, I had a similar kind of portfolio work, and I was able to bring some of those skill sets, and I oversee something similar here at KeHE. Broadly speaking, it's a portion of our HR functions. It includes our burgeoning, we'll call it, data analytics space. In fact, within KeHE at this point, we just call it HR metrics, because to answer some of the questions of what you're getting at, where we're at right now is largely in descriptive stats and some basic reporting and some of the early stage pieces that we need to get in place in order to earn the right, I think, to go deeper. But we'll grow that into a true analytics function soon enough. And then I oversee some of the other near adjacencies in HR that I think are good to own when you own analytics, because they feed a lot of the data that you need into your system. So compensation and pay is in my world, as well as talent management, performance management, talent development pieces. So it's a fun portfolio of work. And then, of course, I work within the broader HR people operational group at KeHE, and serve from a talent analytics standpoint anyone in that group as well as the business leadership.
So we've talked a lot about it, not only at this conference here, but also over the years, where what's the purpose of people data and analytics in a commercial organization? What does it do? What value does it deliver? And we're talking a lot about it informing talent strategy. So talent acquisition, internal development, how you design the organization and what the employee experience or worker experience is going to be like. How do you view our value in 2019 and 2020 and beyond? And a related question, how do we advocate or communicate or market and sell that value internally? Because not many people grew up knowing what this is, right?
Exactly, sure. And so I still think a great place to start is with the, kind of going back to the no margin, no mission concept. Or in a B Corp model, you think about B Corp as going after planet and people, but also profit. Profit matters. In a moment, I'll talk about how we've added a fourth P at KeHE of purpose, which you could argue blends some of the other ones, but we've given ourselves permission to go beyond just profit. Yet I think starting with profit still matters. And so the traditional way I've often started, and it resonates well for any of the financial folks in a room, which often are your top of house leaders, is reminding them that one of the largest line items on your SG&A line is the cost of people, right? So we can at least agree, even before we get to employee experience and how valuable it is, shouldn't we be making the best decisions we can around this rather large aspect of our cost of doing business, if you want to take it as from a cost standpoint. So my point is you can start there with almost any business leader, even if they're not going to buy into it from a employee, experience standpoint, or using business for a force for good. What's so wonderful about what we're seeing with conscious capitalism, with B Corp, with major companies taking the lead in looking at just the social good of their business, is now we have permission to go beyond just the profit, right? And so it's not about just how do I help you make better decisions to manage this cost more effectively, but how can't we all agree that actually giving people a better experience is in itself valuable. And so getting a little ahead of ourselves, but at KeHE, we do talk about a whole person experience, and we care very much about that they can bring their whole selves to work, and that when they go home, we're not doing things at work that vastly change their home life in a negative way, and if anything betters their home life in their community, and that's its own good. We get to measure that for them. Same thing with Patagonia. They cared about it. But if you have to start somewhere, sure, start with the profit. The good news, people cost a lot of money, and we can probably make better decisions around people.
Absolutely, we can make better decisions. One of the things that I would hope is understood broadly, and that you have led a charge on through the innovations that you did throughout your career, but especially highlighted at Patagonia when the 80-90.
980 work
980,
schedule.
Forgive me. But you actually hypothesized or thought about what would matter to the employee, the relationships at home, and you went out and created the measures. generated the data because you thought it mattered. So that data is not in a core HR system. It's like, hey, we made a strategic decision that this is going to be investigated, and we're going to in turn take action, and then we're going to measure the effectiveness of our intervention. Can you speak to how you thought about that and the need for new creative data?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think, it's important to note what we did with a change in schedule, in this case, a 980 schedule, that wasn't particularly a brilliant idea. I mean, it was in the ecosystem, and many other companies were doing this, right? But I think where Patagonia gave us permission to think a little bit differently was in how we measure the impact of it, right? And in fact, it was explicitly stated up front that we will try, the whole idea of the 980 is you're going to work the same number of hours, you're going to try to be the same amount of productive, you're going to produce the same amount, but we're just going to try to create better employee experiences and kind of other good residual effects. And the benefits to the company, if you want to measure it in terms of ROI to the company, might be more in increased engagement and reduced turnover, et cetera. But the point is, we set out just to say, can we all agree if we keep productivity the same and improve these other characteristics of the employee experience, it's a win, right? And so that was a fun project because you weren't having to go in there with, in some ways, even the pressure of trying to do too many things at once. With that lens in mind, it started leaning into the questions, well, what does that mean? What about the employee experience matters? And then quickly we started realizing, there's a lot of work-life balance aspects of these schedulings that matter. We care about people getting out into the outdoors as a company, but we also just care about them as human beings and having relationships with other human beings in their life that aren't in the company. And so that led us down the path of saying, how do we actually build out these metrics? And to your point, you can't go to your traditional engagement survey and find things next to the items of, I have the tools and resources I need to do my job, and I have a better relationship with my partner. That's not there, And so we started saying, well, how do we do that? Now, fast forward ahead a little bit, we looked for some help, by the way. We didn't just do it all on our own. We had some ideas. And then we found, and I think this is just a great tactic for anyone working within a business, you look out at the researchers working in this space, and we found a terrific, smart research scientist at the local Channel Islands University right next to us, who's doing family and work research, who wants some data, right, has some time to help you analyze it, and also knows all the latest research on the questionnaires and things like that, and perfect partnership. It was a win-win at no extra cost to them, just to say, come on in, we'll give you the data, you give us the time, let's brainstorm this together. And we did one of the most rigorous, kind of pre-post studies I've done with a control group on the side, and then a kind of a later, step 3 post-analysis, and it was a lot of fun to see that happen. But it all started with just the philosophy that we can go beyond just the work experience.
Now, if that is being authorized, I imagine it had visibility to the senior-most people in the organization, not only that, because it's going to have, effect potentially every worker, and ended up doing so in a very positive way. So you weren't just guessing what might be the response or the need to change. You actually were basing that in fact. So going to the actual decision-making to authorize that in similar projects, what does that look like for you? Because you're being tasked to, okay, I just need the reports, I got a board meeting next week, I get all that, but we also need to do this more investigative, consultative type work. How does that happen for you?
Yes, exactly. And in that case, we did, let the leadership kind of bite off the decision in smaller chunks, in the sense that we said, let's just try it out with it was a portion of kind of the HR organization, and we pulled in a few other folks in corporate type roles to try out the experience a little bit. So at least we could, kind of go back to them with some qualitative data that said, yeah, this is meaningful to people, and we don't immediately see massive concerns. We also did, interviewing and discussions with employees moving into it. And then with that particular type of change, there were some legal requirements too, that when you go to your hourly workforce, they had to agree to certain things. So there was some work kind of done up front to socialize and get people's head around it. But again, the main kind of sell was to say, okay, based upon what we're seeing here, we are quite confident we can improve the employee experience if you let us really go for this. And we hypothesize, based upon our early read on this, that we can keep productivity the same. give us a chance to go for it for 6 months. And so we dove into it for a period of time and did the pre-post at a kind of 6-month intervals. And you know, we tapped into some measurements along the way to make sure we weren't, you know, needing to course correct too much. But that was one way we socialized it a little bit. I will say I've done other sort of interventions where you really, you know, in an agile way build into this. This was just a little bit of socialization, a big bang, with a commitment only to go a certain period of time, and then we'd reevaluate. But yeah, it was board level decision at that point. And even at Patagonia, their big concern was, we can't mess up productivity. You know, this sounds awesome, but, you know, is this really going to be something we can sustain?
It's a big change.
And that's what you had to prove out at the end. So.
Well, stepping back, that's a fantastic example. So here we are, we're close to 2020, and we're at a different time in terms of the proliferation of data, the tools by which to analyze that data. We have all these disruptions that are happening, AI, globalization, robotic automation, all that. So I was about to say, if you were a CHRO, but I'm going to position the question like this. As a CHRO, Chris, how would you address the challenges of today and tomorrow with data and analytics? Like, how would you want to talk to yourself and help you do your work?
Yes, exactly. Ooh, that's a good question. And I love that you framed it that way, because I'm realizing I have not put myself in that seat so much. You know, I think of the CHROs, my customers, typically in the roles I've had, alongside your CEO and board, right? But if I'm the CHRO, you know, and it's helpful to flip it around, you realize, okay, what I need is some insights at my fingertips that can help tell the stories that I need to tell to help my CEO, board, move us in the right direction around people, right? And in the end, they're trusting me to live, eat, sleep, and breathe the experience of their people, you know, all our people. And they care about them too, but they're trusting me to tell them when we need to course correct, when things aren't, you know, going the way they go, and also help them set a vision and a strategy to build a great organization, right? And so, you know, with I'm thinking my current company, KeHE, right? 5,000 people spread across the United States. We're U.S. based primarily. We have some Canadian locations, but it's primarily this distribution center, the majority of people are within these distribution centers because we're a warehousing company. Then we have a bunch of people doing truck driving. You know, by the way, jobs very much in danger of automation, right? I mean, big time. And so you're sitting there thinking, well, what will these all look like even in 5 years, much less 10 years from now, right? And then we have a bunch of salespeople. They who knows how their jobs will change, but probably differently than some of these warehouse and truck driving jobs. And then you have the corporate jobs, right? So that's our population. It's not you know, radically complex, but it's how do I help you know, my CEO, my board, who have already said they want to do good for people, planet, and make some money, you know, as well, understand where we're at. And so, you know, first of all, data and analytics needs to be there to give us a good view of current state and some of the trends going on. But I do think with the new data available, it's even more, and with how fast things are changing, it's even more critical that we do some forecasting out in the future just to give people a realization that some of this automation, for example, is 5 years away, you know, 10 years probably at the most, you know. And I don't think that that's as top of mind. You know, it's analogous to climate change in some ways. You know, like if you're living on the coasts and in climate, you know, in areas where the climate's changed a lot, you see it. Some of us are buffered, and we just don't realize how fast it's happening. This automation thing, man, you know, it's happening faster than we need. So I do think we need to point more data and analytics at that, help people sort of see the story of where it's going. And then start using it as a way to measure some of the changes along the way.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing all that. It makes me excited because I see all this stuff coming, and from our vantage point, and it's a case where we're trying to shake people and say, this is happening, and you can actually do some things. And it's like, oh, we're not there yet. You know, we'll get to it next year. We're implementing X system, and once we do that, I'm like, the world isn't waiting. And you have a unique perspective insofar as that you understand the data and analytics and opportunities that lie ahead. Not many HR leaders or business leaders, for that matter, you know, grew up in analytics, let alone
Right.
understanding people analytics.
Right.
So there's this education that has to happen. How does that happen in mass? How does that happen within an organization? We're still figuring out. One of the reasons we're at this summit,
That's
obviously.
absolutely right, yeah.
So my pointed question to you, given this, is how do we prioritize? How do we choose what we do? Like, what's the governance like there at KeHE? Do you facilitate a meeting of HR leaders across HR functions, from talent acquisition to learning and development and comp, or is that still being created? And are those groups on the same page? If not, is that an opportunity? Because I'm really interested. There's a lot of people chasing bright light, chasing AI, chasing all this stuff, but we still got to do blocking and tackling. Still got to generate reports, but we also got to address this not only imminent but that current state change. So
yes,
prioritization is a challenge. So how do you think about that, both currently and moving forward?
That's a great question, and absolutely a work in progress, something where we have opportunity to, I think, improve quite a bit. I've been at KeHE for about 6 months now, so I'm still getting myself settled in and even learning all the players and the politics and all that, those kinds of things you need to be particularly effective, right? And by the way, I should layer on one added piece of KeHE. It's an ESOP, or an employee-owned company, which is the ESOP. Stakeholders, shareholders own the vast majority of the company, and then there's a few other funding sources. But most of the people I am trying to do good by are actually the owners, and in a sense, I work for them. We all work for ourselves, right? It's an interesting dynamic, and if you think about where are most of the people, they're out in these warehouses and in these truck driving jobs. In other words, the other way to say it is the majority of my owners are in jobs that won't necessarily exist in 5 to 10 years. Well, how do I think about that, right?
Wow.
And so I'm kind of sitting here realizing I need to, and in fact, I'm even inspired by this idea. I'm realizing it's a little how the climate scientists, are sitting out there and they're like, how do we tell people about it? Well, we're all in, the space of people analytics. We're seeing some things happen, and how do we tell people about it? The truth is, what's being prioritized right now is much more near-term stuff. So right now we have some opportunities with turnover in some of our warehouses, particularly with certain jobs. And we know that's a priority of the business leaders. That's coming right out of, kind of exec team level and even board level. You got to get on this, and they're pulling together whole, kind of committees and work streams around it. And therefore it's very easy for the people analytics just to plug in and be a helpful tool within their broader mission. So that's easy, but I think what's tricky is you're describing a good question around how do you balance the immediate fire, literally, going on that you absolutely have to be part of. That's a good example. With the realization that we're in a unique place to get out ahead of current state and help people see that. So where I have work in progress, and you've inspired me a little bit in having to sit up here and say that I don't have this all figured out, is absolutely going back and thinking about how I can pull together, I think, a little bit more of that working leadership group within HR. We are also, and I think this is true of many of the colleagues I work with in people analytics, is we also are made sure we're plugged into the core kind of business intelligence community of practice at KeHE. And so I have someone on my team who goes and sits on their regular meetings. And so that's another opportunity to both learn but influence and make sure that, we're suggesting they start looking into the future. And as they look into the future, it opens up the chance for us to ask the question of, well, what is the people part of your future question? And let me help inform that. But I think where I need to move next is getting some coalescing around prioritization within HR beyond current fires.
Well, it's such an exciting opportunity, right? Because we have these data and systems that now can analyze the employee experience, the candidate experience. We just have better visibility into what's going on and what might happen and all that, which is great, but it doesn't have an audience to affect appropriate change, and it's of marginal value. It remains esoteric. What I would like to go deeper on is something that you alluded to, and I got a chill when you said it. Your owners are your customers. Your decisions and what you do is going to impact them over time. Their jobs are changing. So how are you then helping them change in accordance with where the business is going? So it's not kind of a separation like it is in most organizations. Like you're an owner, you have a stake in the company, literally.
Literally.
And if you're going to be contributing 5+ years from now, you are going to have to adapt. So how are we going to help facilitate you adapting? So it's now no longer an aha in our space, whether it be talent or people analytics, is that skill taxonomy, skill development, reframing work from these jobs which are static to actual task level or project level, buckets. So maybe a lot of those tasks or projects are going to go by the wayside, get automated, and then there's these piece of work that's going to remain, and this new piece of work that's going to develop.
Right. Exactly.
So the pointed question again is: are you setting the stage for that discussion and do that type of work and leveraging not only internal data sources but external data sources? I mean, what's your view on how your work is going to look 12, 24 months from now?
Right, and at most, right now, we are setting the stage, but that's a great place for analytics to begin, right? Just even showcasing current state. We have data in our systems that go back at least a dozen years, so you can at least go back, and some of the early work we've started to dabble in is just say, are there some success stories of people who we can show have started in these jobs and kind of moved into materially different or meaningfully different types of work. Okay, so here's some paths that might make some sense. So we're just in the early stages of trying to map out possible paths out of what essentially would be kind of entry-level work within a warehouse or et cetera. And in fact, by the way, the driver job is a little bit higher level, higher skilled job. Now, it may get automated in its own way, but currently it's viewed as a path up and out of a warehouse type job. So some of the work, in fact, that predates me, no credit for this, is in fact trying to hire more internal drivers from these kind of warehouse jobs and connecting. So early stages, in other words, is just to tell the story of what's working, where's some success. I think quickly what's forming as well, though, is the picture of how little people have mobility out of these jobs. Yeah. So unfortunately, the success is still the exception, not the rule, right? And how do we even start helping people get their head around the fact that, okay, again, kind of what we just said, the facts are the facts. Most of my owners work in jobs that are changing significantly, and most of the people who work in those jobs don't move out of those jobs. Okay, even just stop there. Do we care? What are we going to do about So we're starting to try to get that level of conversation going through some data and analytics at the leadership levels and within HR. I think equally important, and some work I'm very excited about being part of with colleagues that were participating with this conference and in discussions around, is even just getting some clarity and some standardization around what do we mean by helping people have mobility out of some of these jobs. A lot of the work I did at Patagonia, and even here when I kind of start here as B Corp, and a lot of what B Corp points you to, let's face it, is focusing a lot on livable wages, making sure that at least the jobs, whatever they pay, aren't falling too far below a livable wage. And I think that's a very important question, but that's not the same as a mobility question. And we could pay people a couple more dollars an hour, and they're still, in a sense, kind of stuck in a class of work that itself is susceptible to automation, and if it is automated, it doesn't mean they have any more skills that lets them go on and do something different. And so I think the answer to some of these mobility metrics, as we talk about it, will be looking at, can people not just make a few dollars more or make a slight promotion from, say, the entry-level warehouse job to the slightly better warehouse job also that will get automated, but can they find ways to grow skills while in this situation to move into a management position, perhaps, move into something completely different, or to your point, start being ready for whatever these new jobs we design, which might be part of the solution, that are still there in the warehouse, but they take skills that took longer to kind of develop and grow. Therefore, these folks actually get paid more because there's the whole key to getting paid more, I always tell people, is you just have to be good at something that not that many other people are good at. It's a supply and demand problem. The problem with these warehouse jobs is, it's a tight labor market. There's still a lot of people who are capable of doing the basic stuff right away. So how do I help people be capable of stuff that not everyone's capable of doing? That's mobility. So,
and related to what you were just saying, historically, there's been this fear that if I'm going to invest in my warehouse workers, my drivers, and make them better, that they're going to bail, go to our competitors, and that's a very scarcity mindset, mentality.
It's a good way of saying it.
Lose my event or my investment. Increasingly, though, people, particularly young people, are joining organizations. Research is showing that I am believing that that is going to help me advance my career, both within that organization or out, because the work experience, the educational opportunities within that. So is that the way you're looking at it? It's like, hey, you come in here, your economic mobility, your ability to move up might not only be within this organization, it might be elsewhere.
Absolutely. And that's the thing that I don't know why I didn't see it as clearly up until a few years ago, but as I kept digging into data and engagement surveys, for example, and they would, anytime somebody would say, well, I need more learning and development, you'd kind of dig in, you'd think, okay, how do I help them with that? And oftentimes I've owned the learning and development function, and I do at KeHE. You figure it's more training or something like that. When you dig in more and do interviews with people and keep digging in, you realize the majority of the time I'm starting to realize is they're confounding that, and probably rightly so, with career development. They really mean, I want to get to the next bigger thing. I want to do more meaningful work. I want to be more valuable, and I want to get paid more and get promoted and all those kinds of things. And so increasingly, and this is a little bit anecdotal, but it feels as though increasingly the ability to help people truly grow their careers and grow their value is one of the most meaningful benefits you can give people, right? Yeah. And to your point, if you're in a scarcity mindset, you start thinking, okay, well, I'll pull them in and they'll grow fast with me, and then other people just pluck them off. You have to break yourself of that, and it's counterintuitive, but the truth is they're going to stick with you because they're growing faster with you than somewhere else. Yeah. And yes, maybe some of them move off and go somewhere else, but they stuck with you longer, you know. And so even as a direct manager of people on my teams, I've often said, look, call me out on this. I'm going to try to grow your career faster than anyone else can as you work under me. Whenever that stops, you should leave. Like, I can't blame you, but I'm going to assume I'm going to make you more valuable. But in a counterintuitive way, I'm going to assume that's what's going to cause you to stick with me. And you know what? We're going to have a lot more fun and do a lot more great things anyway if we have this abundance mindset instead of the scarcity mindset. So yes, we're trying to kind of flip that around and say, let's move forward that. And maybe I'm giving too specific a shout out to another company, but a very large kind of retail big box company has been, inspired me with doing some of these kinds of ideas of how do you help people gain an education for jobs that aren't the jobs they're working on today at all, may never be the jobs that the same company even hires them for, and maybe other people come and pick them off. Yep. But they're going to do it, A, because it's the right thing to do, and B, it turns out it's leading towards better retention anyway. So why not? It takes belief, and obviously data can support that. Hey, that wasn't as painful. That was a myth, in fact. Right. We actually had good financial results and customer satisfaction, all those good things. So a couple more things I want to touch on before we wrap here. If someone, business leader, CHRO, leader in HR or talent, is listening to us and say, okay, they've been talking. Chris is an expert in people analytics. They haven't even talked about AI really in HR. So I'm going to frame the question this way: is AI something that is a big distraction, or is it something that integral to your thinking around HR innovation and people analytics, or is it more of a means to an end? So I'm going to find a problem, and AI might emerge as a potential solution. How do you think about AI in HR? Yeah, sometimes my first reaction to it is it's such a big term, right? And all it comes to sort of like somebody saying, let's improve leadership at the company. And you're kind of like, all right, well, that's a large term. What do we mean? Let's improve even engagement, by the way. It's got a loaded, broad term, right? But you can't not be thinking about AI. So first off, AI is in particular domains is the reason jobs are being disrupted. So you have to watch what it's doing on the work side of the equation, right? Before we even use it for people analytics on ourselves. And so you're paying attention to how the techniques are growing and changing and disrupting the work itself, right? Because that's the domain I care about. And how will it also disrupt the interface between humans and work? Within the HR space, I think it's you pick and choose certain techniques that are valuable. I think it does have the danger to be a distraction. You're absolutely right. It's I think actually that's true of all kind of people analytics. There's this danger of getting enamored by the $10 analytical technique when the 10-cent version worked great, right? Yeah. Or especially when you're using it to sell past the close, with a decision, and so oftentimes with my own, analytics teams, I'm always sort of saying, okay, in the background, let's use whatever techniques we need to feel like we truly did come to an answer that had, some statistical significance, some real meaningful pieces. And then let's separate that almost entirely from how we sell it. Yeah. And so if AI is needed to get to that answer, great. Every once in a while, maybe AI is needed to sell the answer, to be able to go and say, hey, we use some, we either incorporate AI in, I was thinking on the talent acquisition side is being disrupted by some AI with chatbots and these kinds of things. And so that people can get their head around it quick. They get excited about it. Then we go off and we say, okay, yeah, we used a chatbot to gather some information from, this prospective hiring group. And oh, by the way, we're also going to come over and do some text analytics on, what's the sentiment of these groups as they're coming in and how do they differ. And, by the way, maybe we can get a sense of whether chatbots are better at, saying the word AI gets people's attention. So that's good. But I think the quick answer to your question is absolutely paying attention to it, looking for opportunities to use it, both in terms of techniques as well as to sell it. But broadly speaking, trying not to get overly distracted by it when the 10-cent answer works just fine.
Yeah, well, absolutely well said. And one of the places AI is emerging is in what we talked about earlier around bringing the whole self to work, which can be translated in many organizations to diversity, inclusion, and the sense of belonging. Yeah. So what are your thoughts and ideas in that area when we talk about how analytics can play a role in not only shedding light on those themes, but helping improve them?
Oh, I think that's so good. And again, the kind of back to this theme of what's great about working for companies that care about more than just the bottom line profit is you can go back to your old techniques of selling it through profit because they still care about profit, but you have permission to go beyond that and have other reasons why it would be good to do these interventions in the world just for their own sake. And for KeHE, improving the experience of someone's entire whole self at work and then at home and in their community is meaningful to us. So we would actually probably be able to sell an intervention that supported people's mobility in our warehouse locations on literally the basis that it's part of serving the communities we're in. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of companies are starting to move that way, that kind of mindset starting to gain. And so we do care about it. It does demand from an analytics standpoint, then you start thinking about, okay, well, what about, what kind of data do I need to gather to support this broader perspective when I was just used to worrying about their performance in their job and maybe their engagement around their job? Which, as some would say, is just a very extractive mindset, right? What can I get out of these people? Okay, if I'm starting to measure what am I putting into them, themselves, their whole selves, their families, their communities, well, I mean, first of all, you start going, look at all your current measures. Does your engagement survey or whatever pulses you're doing look at more than just their experience at work? Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair question. And then now, even more so, we've already in people analytics for a while worried about macro trends, kind of outside data around hiring, the marketplace, workforce trends, all those kinds of things. We care about that. Well, for the first time, though, you start thinking about, well, if I care about the community, beyond these people, well, what kind of information can I gather about these communities? Mm-hmm. And if I take interventions within my company around education, let's say, and mobility, might be interesting to see what that does to the broader communities that I'm in. A lot of places we're in are in, they're not like the highest standards of living type communities, which is why people are working in the warehouse jobs. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to make a bigger impact than just your employee base. We are not there is my key point. I don't feel like I have great, kind of outside external market data or community-based data on these things. All I'm saying is it's good to challenge yourself to think beyond the traditional metrics.
Well, as we start to wrap up, that theme, I cannot celebrate, amplify any higher, because the fact that we as whether it be business leaders, HR leaders, people analytics leaders, historically, people analytics leaders have been customers of the data within their system.
Right.
Right. You know,
Right.
it's just like the HR system was selected, ATS was selected, learning was selected. There's data being popped out. We're supposed to do some magic to answer the questions leaders want or need
Right.
to know. Now, increasingly, we're getting visibility into those questions, and sometimes not only being attentive to what's being asked, but attentive to what's not being asked that should be asked, because we have visibility into not only the data and tools within our system, but outside, our system, and that then creates all these new possibilities. But it also, to our earlier discussion, creates a whole heck of a lot of work, and where does it, fit in? So, again, as we wrap, any final words for any advice around how to not only stand up a people analytics capabilities? I think most organizations say, I get it. We need reports. We need to be, researching. But what are 2 or 3 of the things that, okay, if you're going to mandate that we do this, what needs to be in place from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great way of framing it. So I think, again, I'm just inspired by this idea of, okay, you gotta start somewhere and where kind of your core expertise are and where people are asking for people analytics already. And a lot of that may be around some of the traditional things of productivity and performance and leading to profit and ROI and those kinds of things. And you start there, right? But just continually reminding yourself that it's okay to look bigger than that and think about the impact of what's coming in the future. So bigger in terms of, time frame, as well as bigger in terms of, well, how does this all kind of coalesce to affect the planet and the people experience, et cetera. And when I'm thinking about people, can I think about more than just their sliver of experience at work? What about the whole person? What about them as a physical being and health and wellness, as a spiritual being? If they want to bring that to work, what does that mean? What does that mean in their communities? As somebody who cares about their skills and meaningful work, what does that mean? So just asking those bigger questions and then challenging yourself, and somebody else gave me this advice, just find one metric that, even if your business leaders aren't asking for it, sneak that onto your slide at the bottom, and just say, oh, by the way, turns out, this led to this ROI, blah, 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 if that's what they want to know. And we found out that people expressed that they were, had better relationships with their family as a result. Well, how'd you even look at that? So you're just trying to kind of pepper in things, if that's the only place you can start, that's bigger than the core.
Oh, God. No, I'm getting, that's a fantastic idea. It's like, that's somewhere where on-base percentage came from, Moneyball. It's like, that was not
great analogy.
That was not the standard baseball card metric. It was discovered, so, and then it was socialized. So, Chris, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for sharing.
Likewise.
And do it again, sir.
I love being part of the journey with you on this, and to everyone else in this community, very grateful for their influence and their inspiration. So just glad to be on the ride.
All right, likewise.
Yeah.